Have you ever heard the story of Job in the Bible? Well, today I'm going to show you how this story explains Job's journey to loving God unconditionally. What is going on, everyone? We are back for another episode of Prospering with Christ. I hope that you had a wonderful week last week, and I hope that this week will be just as amazing to you as well. So, today's episode is a little interesting and a little different. We are going to be talking about Job's journey to loving God unconditionally. I wanted to talk about this today because for the last few weeks, we have been discussing the topic of unconditional love. And so I've been praying and I've been studying and I've been trying to figure out how to dissect this topic and go a lot deeper with it, because I understand that going from a place of showing God and showing other people transactional love to trying to show Him unconditional love is not a process that's going to happen overnight. And so I wanted to go into this topic, take this topic deeper, and find ways to help you and support you on your journey of transformation. And so, as I was sitting down with God and I was trying to figure out what this episode should be about, He spoke to me about the book of Job. I have read the book of Job multiple times, and every time I read it and every time I hear about it, I always hear people talk about Job suffering and how God wanted Job to suffer. And we don't really understand why, but it had to happen, and Job had to get through it so that he can be blessed on the other side. And every time that I read the book of Job, it was always when I was going through a season of suffering, because I felt like maybe it would be a book that I could relate to in that season. But after God spoke to me this week and He started telling me to do the book of Job pertaining to this topic of unconditional love, I started to get a lot of revelation, and I really want to share that revelation with you. And so today we are going to start reading the book of Job, and then I'm going to break it down and I'm going to share the revelation that God shared with me. So if you want to follow along, start at Job chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "There was once a man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. He was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God and stayed away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. He also had many servants. He was, in fact, the richest person in that entire area. Job's sons would take turns preparing feasts in their homes, and they would also invite their 3 sisters to celebrate with them. When these celebrations ended, sometimes after several days, Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, 'Perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts.' This was Job's regular practice. One day, members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, came with them. 'Where have you come from?' the Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, 'I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on.' Then the Lord asked Satan, 'Have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil.' Satan replied to the Lord, 'Yes, but Job has a good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take everything away he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.' 'All right, you may test him,' the Lord said to Satan. 'Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically.' So Satan left the Lord's presence. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the elder brother's house, a messenger arrived at Job's home with this news: 'Your oxen were plowing, with the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabians raided us. They stole all the animals and killed all the farmhands. I am the only one who escaped to tell you.' While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: 'The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I am the only one who escaped to tell you.' While he was still speaking, a third messenger arrived with this news. 3 bands of Chaldean raiders have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news. Your sons and daughters were feasting in their eldest brother's home. Suddenly, a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness and hit the house on all sides. The house collapsed, and all your children are dead. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. Job stood up and tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell to the ground to worship. He said, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. Every time I hear people talk about the story of Job, they always talk about it as if God just wanted Job to suffer. And some people even think that God just wanted to make a bet with the devil. But if you look at chapter 1, it clearly explains why the situation happened to Job. God was having a conversation with Satan, and he was bragging to Satan about Job's character. And Satan basically told him in verses 6 through 11, Job's love for you is transactional. Job's love for you is only because you have been providing for him. You have been blessing him. You have been giving him everything that he could ever want. He has no reason not to love you. But if you would take those possessions away, you will realize that Job does not love you the way that you thought. You will realize that Job's love for you was transactional. Job does not have an unconditional love for you. Job does not love you simply because you are God the Father. Job is loving what you are doing for him. The devil planting the seed of Job having transactional love is the only reason why this whole story exists. And when I hear people talk about the story of Job, they always talk about it from a negative place where they're asking, why did God make a bet with the devil? Why did God bet his son off and make him suffer just to prove a point to the devil? God allowing Satan to harm Job's possessions was not because he wanted to prove a point to the devil. It's because he wanted to test Job. He wanted to see if maybe what Satan was saying was right. And if it is right, this season of suffering is going to strengthen him and transform him so that he can get back on track with God. And so if you notice at the end of the chapter, Job did not take the bait. He did not sin against God. And so what did the devil do? Well, let's go to chapter 2. One day, the members of the heavenly court came again to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser Satan came with them. Where have you come from? The Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. Then the Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He's the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil, and he has maintained his integrity even though you urged me to harm him without cause. Satan replied to the Lord, skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his life. But reach out and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to your face. All right, do with him as you please, the Lord said to Satan, but spare his life. So Satan left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die. But Job replied, you talk like a foolish woman. Should we only accept good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? So in all this, Job said nothing wrong. When 3 of Job's friends heard of the tragedy he had suffered, they got together and traveled from their homes to comfort and console him. Their names were Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. When they saw Job from a distance, they scarcely recognized him. Wailing loudly, they tore their robes and threw dust into the air over their heads to show their grief. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and nights. No one said a word to Job, for they saw that his suffering was too great for words. Before we move on, I want to talk about God's response in both tests. The first time that Satan came to test Job, God said, "Do what you want to him, but don't harm him physically." In the second test, he said, "Do what you want to him, but spare his life." And I started to question God and ask him, "Why did you say that?" Like, it really stood out to me. Why did you say that? And I started to realize because God's purpose in the situation was never to destroy Job. God's purpose in the situation was never to harm Job. God's purpose was to transform him. God's purpose was to show him things in this season so that he can grow, mature, become better, and come out on top. And you may be wondering why. Because in these two chapters, Job is not doing anything wrong. In both tests, Job is passing. Job has not shifted his relationship with God. He has not sinned against God. He has not said anything bad against God. So what does Job need to change? Well, let's go to chapter 3. At last, Job spoke, and he cursed the day of his birth. He said, "Let the day of my birth be erased, and the night I was conceived. Let that day be turned to darkness. Let it be lost even to God on high, and let no light shine on it. Let the darkness and utter gloom claim that day for its own. Let a black cloud overshadow it, and let the darkness terrify it. Let that night be blotted off the calendar, never again to be counted among the days of the year, never again to appear among the months. Let that night be childless. Let it have no joy. Let those who are experts at cursing, whose cursing could rouse Leviathan, curse that day. Let its morning stars remain dark. Let it hope for light, but in vain. May it never see the morning light. Curse that day for failing to shut my mother's womb, for letting me be born to see all this trouble. Why wasn't I born dead? Why didn't I die as I came from the womb? Why was I laid on my mother's lap? Why did she nurse me at her breast? Had I died at birth, I would now be at peace. I would be asleep and at rest. I would rest with the world's kings and prime ministers, whose great buildings now lie in ruins. I would rest with princes rich in gold, whose palaces were filled with silver. Why wasn't I buried like a stillborn child, like a baby who never lives to see the light? For in death the wicked cause no trouble, and the weary are at rest. Even captives are at ease in death, with no guards to curse them. Rich and poor are both there, and the slave is free from his master. Oh, why give light to those in misery, and life to those who are bitter? They long for death, and it won't come. They search for death more eagerly than for hidden treasure. They're filled with joy when they finally die, and rejoice when they find the grave. Why is life given to those with no future, those God has surrounded with difficulties? I cannot eat for sighing. My groan pours out like water. What I always feared has happened to me. What I dreaded has come true. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest. Only comes trouble. When Job was first tested, he started off standing firm on his love for God. But then his friends came, and then in chapter 3, the first thing that he did was start to complain. And I decided to put myself in Job's shoes because I wanted to understand what was the shift. How did he go from standing firm and believing and trusting in God to complaining and speaking all of these negative things about himself? And I thought to myself, maybe Job still had hope. Maybe Job had hope that God was going to come through and he was going to right this wrong, that God was going to come through and he was going to explain why this was happening. But at the end of chapter 2, it says that Job's friends came and they sat there for 7 days and 7 nights, meaning that Job sat there day by day going by, night by night going by, hour by hour going by, not hearing from God, not seeing the situation get better, not getting an explanation as to why this happened when he felt like he did not deserve this circumstance. And as day by day went by, the hope that he had in his heart probably started to die. Seeing this circumstance play out right in front of his face while God is nowhere to be found probably made this more real for him. And he got to a point where he started to speak from that reality. He got to a point where he started to accept that reality. And once he made the decision to accept it, it started to expose what was truly in his heart. I don't know if you ever heard this saying, but they say, what somebody says to you when they are upset is how they truly feel. And the same thing applies to our circumstance. We can tell God all day that we love him, that we trust him, that we have faith, that we're going to be here no matter what. We're going to be committed to him no matter what. But what we say in the moments where he does not show up, what we say in the moments where our circumstances does not look favorable, is how we truly feel. It's easy to tell God that we trust him. It's easy to tell God that we have faith. It's easy to tell God that we're always going to be there. But the moment that God stops coming through, the moment that God stops meeting our needs, the moment that God stops doing everything that we want him to do, is going to expose our heart posture and tell God how we are truly feeling. I want to look at some of the things that Job was saying. Verse 23. Why is life given to those with no future? This shows us that Job accepted this circumstance to be his reality, and he has lost complete hope. He feels like he is going to remain here. He feels that this is the best that he will ever get, that he's never going to make it out. Not even just that, but verse 25 shows us what Job's heart posture was this entire time. He says, what I always feared has happened to me. What I dreaded the most has come true. And once I read that, I started to ask myself, was Job's good deeds that he was doing before the suffering, was it ever genuine? Was it genuinely because he loved God? Was it genuinely because he wanted to honor God? Or was it because he was afraid of being punished? He felt like if I didn't do this, God would strike me down. If I didn't do this, God will not bless me. If I didn't do this, God will punish me and he'll kill me. It wasn't genuine. It was because he was afraid. He was operating from the fear that we were talking about in last week's episode, when we were talking about how people teach us to fear God as in be afraid of him. It wasn't because he honored God. It wasn't because he respected God. It wasn't because he genuinely loved God. It was because he was afraid of God. And I wanted to read this and see if you guys caught it, but we're going to go back to chapter 1, verse 5. He said, this is when he was talking about his children having celebrations and they would invite people over. They said, when these celebrations ended, sometimes after several hours, Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular practice. On paper, it looks nice that Job gets up and he purifies his children in God's name. On paper, it looks nice. But when Job tells us what his intention is for doing it, you will realize that he wasn't doing that because he genuinely wanted to honor God with his children. He wasn't doing that because he genuinely respected God. He was doing it because he was afraid that his children may have sinned and would have been struck down by God. He viewed God as somebody to be afraid of. He viewed God as somebody that you should be afraid to disappoint. So all of the things that he was doing, all of the good deeds that he was doing was not genuine. It was because he was afraid of who God is. He was afraid of the power that God had. And so when you put that into perspective, you'll realize that Satan necessarily wasn't wrong. When Satan said that if you were to take away everything that Job has, his attitude towards you is going to change, Satan was not wrong. And God knew that. That's the reason why he allowed this to happen. Because the moment that this happened, it took from chapter 2 to chapter 3 for Job's real heart posture to come and be exposed. And now that he is being real with God, God is going to do the work in him to change. And I just wanted to give a disclaimer because I know some of y'all are going to listen to that part that I said where I said Satan was not wrong. And y'all are going to be like, oh my God, she said Satan was not wrong. If you think that Satan does not know your weak areas, you are in denial. Why do you think Satan is so good at manipulating you? Why do you think Satan is so good at attacking you? Why do you think Satan is so good at getting in your head and putting the right thoughts in there to make you doubt certain things? It's because he knows your weak areas. So Satan knew Job's weak areas. Satan knew that everything that he was doing for God was not genuine. It was out of fear. And he used his weak areas to attack him the same way that he uses our weak areas to attack us. Another thing I realized going back to chapter 3, verse 26, he said, I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest. Only trouble comes. As I read that, I realized that Job immediately forgot about the life that he lived before. Job was blessed his entire life. Job experienced nothing but greatness his entire life. And the moment he encountered one situation of struggle, he already erased everything that God had done for him. And on one hand, putting myself in his shoes, I question, can we blame him? Because if he has been blessed his entire life, this means that this is his first storm. He has no other storm to look back at and remember how God brought him out of it. So he doesn't know if he's going to make it out this place. He doesn't know if he's going to be okay. But if he truly loved God, knew God the way that he said he did, he would know God's character to know that God was going to carry him in this season. God was going to have better for him in this season. And this is why it's so important to hold on to hope in the dark times, to hold on to hope in the storms. We can't erase everything that God has done for us in the past just because we're experiencing a bad moment. Remember that gratitude opens doors for opportunities. It opens doors for you to see a way out. It opens doors for God to speak to you. It opens doors for favor. But complaining keeps you stuck in the same place. Next, we're going to read chapter 4 and chapter 5. It says, Then Eliphaz the Temanite replied to Job, Will you be patient and let me say a word? For who could keep from speaking out? In the past, you have encouraged many people. You have strengthened those who were weak. Your words have supported those who were falling. You encouraged those with shaky knees. But now, when trouble strikes, you lose heart. You are terrified when it touches you. Don't your reverence for God gives you confidence? Doesn't your life of integrity give you hope? Stop and think. Do the innocent die? When have the upright been destroyed? My experience shows that those who plant trouble and cultivate evil will harvest the same. A breath from God destroys them. They vanish in a blast of his anger. The lion roars and the wildcat snarls, but the teeth of strong lions will be broken. The fierce lion will starve for lack of prey, and the cubs of the lioness will be scattered. The truth was given to me in secret, as though whispered in my ear. It came to me in a disturbing vision at night, when people are in a deep sleep. Fear gripped me and my bones trembled. A spirit swept past my face and my hair stood on end. The spirit stopped, but I couldn't see its shape. There was a form before my eyes. In the silence, I heard a voice say, "Can a mortal be innocent before God? Can anyone be pure before the Creator? If God does not trust his own angels and has charged his messengers with foolishness, how much less will he trust people made of clay? They are made of dust, crushed as easily as a moth. They are alive in the morning, but dead by evening, gone forever without a trace. Their tent cords are pulled, and the tent collapses, and they die in ignorance." Cry for help, but will anyone answer you? Which of the angels will help you? Surely resentment destroys the fool, and jealousy kills the simple. I have seen that fools may be successful for the moment, but then comes sudden disaster. Their children are abandoned far from help. They are crushed in court with no one to defend them. The hungry devour their harvest, even when it is guarded by brambles. The thirsty pant after their wealth, but evil does not spring from the soil, and troubles does not sprout from the earth. People are born for trouble, as readily as sparks fly up from a fire. If I were you, I would go to God and present my case to him. He does great things too marvelous to understand. He performs countless miracles. He gives rain for the earth and water for the fields. He gives prosperity to the poor and protects those who suffer. He frustrates the plans of schemers so the work of their hands will not succeed. He traps the wise in their own cleverness so their cunning schemes are thwarted. They find it is dark in the daytime, and they grope at noon as if it were night. He rescues the poor from cutting words of the strong and rescues them from the clutches of the powerful. And so at last the poor have hope, and the snapping jaws of the wicked are shut. But consider the joy of those corrected by God. Do not despise the discipline of the Almighty when you sin. For though he wounds, he also bandages. He strikes, but his hand also heals. From 6 disasters he will rescue you. Even in the 7th he will keep you from evil. He will save you from the death in time of famine, from the power of the sword in time of war. You will be safe from slander and have no fear when destruction comes. You will laugh at destruction and famine, and wild animals will not terrify you. You will be at peace with the stones of the field, and its wild animals will be at peace with you. You will know that your home is safe. When you survey your possessions, nothing will be missing. You will have many children. Your descendants will be as plentiful as grass. You will go to the grave at a ripe old age, like a sheaf of grain harvested at the proper time. We have studied life and found all this to be true. Listen to my counsel and apply it to yourself. Whenever I hear the story of Job, we always talk about his friends, because his friends was misguiding him and his friends was giving him wrong information that was steering him in the wrong direction. But there was something that Eliphaz said in chapter 4, verses 3 through 6. He said, "In the past, you have encouraged many people. You have strengthened those who were weak. Your words have supported those who were falling. You encourage those with shaky knees. But now, when trouble strikes, you lose heart. You are terrified when it touches you. Doesn't your reverence for God give you confidence? Doesn't your life of integrity give you hope?" Eliphaz was questioning Job because he was telling him, "You always speak so highly of God when other people are going through storms, but the moment that a storm touches you, your actions stop matching your words. The things that you were telling people to do when they were in your season, when they were experiencing your circumstance, you're not even doing while you are there. It's so easy for us to advise other people and tell other people that God is good and tell other people that they're going to make it through. But the moment that we experience something, the moment that the pain touches us, the moment that we enter the storm, the same things that we tell other people we can't even live by. And I started to wonder, because I read this story so many times and I just always wondered, why did this happen? Why did God allow Job to suffer? And I started to realize that you can't help people with something that you did not experience. If I never been through a storm, if I never been disappointed by God, if I never been hurt by God, then how can I help you when you are going through that? How can I help you and advise you when you are trying to make it through that? It's easy for me to tell you that God is good. But if I actually experienced it for myself, then I know how you feel while you are going through it. I know that you don't want to hear that God is good. I know that you are hurt. I know that you are disappointed. And because I experienced it myself, I know how you feel and I can help you make it through, because God gave me revelation and God gave me help to make it through when I was feeling that. So now I know how to help you when you're feeling certain emotions. I wondered if this suffering that Job experienced was not just to help him develop unconditional love, but was to also help him advise people in the future. Another thing that I realized when I was reading chapters 4 and 5 is that Job's friend had limited wisdom. His friend automatically assumed that God was trying to punish Job because Job was evil. The reason why he assumed that is because that is the only wisdom that he has in this area of this type of suffering. He has only experienced, he has only learned that God allows this type of suffering for people who is evil. And because he had that limited wisdom, he felt like this had to be the answer as to why this is happening. And even though Job's friend's wisdom was right, it was also wrong. Because when you apply the right wisdom to the wrong situation, you are wrong. In some situations, yes, God could be trying to punish somebody, or he's allowing somebody to be punished for being evil. But that was not the case in this situation. God was trying to shake some things off of Job. He was trying to shake the spirit of fear off of Job. He was trying to teach Job how to genuinely love him, not love him from a place of being afraid, not love him from a place of being scared, but loving him genuinely and loving him unconditionally. He was trying to allow Job to experience something that was going to shift him, something that was going to grow him, something that was going to mature him. But Job's friends could not understand that. And this is why it is so important that we are very cautious of who we hang around when we are down. Because if Job was to give in and listen to the advice of his friends, they would have took him off track of what God was trying to do in this season. And it could have potentially caused him to stay here longer because he was not getting what God was trying to give to him. But let's go to chapter 6. Then Job spoke again. If my misery could be weighed and my troubles be put on the scales, they would outweigh all the sands of the sea. That is why I spoke impulsively. For the Almighty has struck me down with his arrows. Their poison infects my spirit. God's terrors are lined up against me. Don't I have the right to complain? Don't wild donkeys bray when they find no grass, and oxen bellow when they have no food? Don't people complain about unsalted food? Does anyone want the tasteless white of an egg? My appetite disappears when I look at it. I gag at the thought of eating it. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant my desire. I wish he would crush me. I wish he would reach out his hand and kill me. At least I can take comfort in this. Despite the pain, I have not denied the words of the Holy One, but I don't have the strength to endure. I have nothing to live for. Do I have the strength of a stone? Is my body made of bronze? No, I am utterly helpless, without any chance of success. One should be kind to a fainting friend. But you accuse me without any fear of the Almighty. My brothers, you have proved as unreliable as a seasonal brook that overflows its banks in the spring, when it is swollen with ice and melting snow. But when the hot weather arrives, the water disappears. The brook vanishes in the heat. The caravans turn aside to be refreshed, but there is nothing to drink, so they die. The caravans from Temash search for this water. The travelers from Sheba hope to find it. They count on it but are disappointed. When they arrive, their hopes are dashed. You too have given no help. You have seen my calamity and you are afraid. But why? Have I ever asked you for a gift? Have I begged for anything of yours for myself? Have I asked you to rescue me from my enemies or to save me from ruthless people? Teach me and I will keep quiet. Show me what I have done wrong. Honest words can be painful, but what do your criticisms amount to? Do you think your words are convincing when you disregard my cry of desperation? You would even send an orphan into slavery or sell a friend. Look at me. Would I lie to your face? Stop assuming my guilt, for I have done no wrong. Do you think I am lying? Don't I know the difference between right and wrong? The first thing I want to talk about from this chapter is verse 2 and 3. It says, if my misery could be weighed and my trouble be put on the scales, they would outweigh all the sands of the sea. That is why I spoke impulsively. When I looked up the definition of the word impulsively, it means to act without thinking or considering the consequences. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. And what you say is going to affect your point of view and how you see things and how you move forward in the situation. We can tell by looking at verse 5, where he says, don't I have the right to complain? That the way that Job is choosing to speak in this circumstance is keeping him in a victim mentality. A victim mentality is when you have a pity party for yourself, where you feel helpless, where you feel hopeless, where you feel like there is no saving you. And so you start to view your circumstance from that point of view. You start to feel like, what is the point of trying? What is the point of looking for a light? What is the point of looking for an opportunity? What is the point of looking for creative ideas to get me out of this situation? Because I am a victim. I am hopeless. I am just going to sit here and soak in my misery. But I am here today to tell you that when you make the decision to be a victim, when you make the decision to soak in your misery, you are wasting time. You are miserable here because you feel like it's never going to end, but you have the choice to decide if this situation will end. And if you choose to be a survivor, if you choose to look for hope, if you choose to look for a way out, I promise you, your misery is only going to be for a season. It is not up to God. It is not up to the devil. It is not up to anybody outside of you of how long you are going to stay here. I wondered so many times while reading this book of Job, why did it take God to the end of the chapter to speak to him? Can you imagine going through this season, losing everything, including your children, and not hearing from God for days? And now I start to question, could it be that Job's perspective, that the way that Job chose to speak over the situation was blocking him from hearing from God? It is no secret that when you are sad, when you are depressed, when you are down, when you feel hopeless, it blocks you and it puts a guard up where God cannot get to you. So could it be that Job's response was slowing down God being able to speak to him and provide him with the clarity and understanding that he needed? Okay, guys, so my phone is about to die, so I'm going to try and read two more chapters and we'll talk about them and then we're going to end for the day. So let's go to chapter 7. This is Job still talking. Is it not all human life a struggle? Is not all human life a struggle? Our lives are like that of a hired hand, like a worker who longs for the shade, like a servant waiting to be paid. I too have been assigned months of futility, long and weary nights of misery. Lying in bed, I think, when will it be morning? But the night drags on, and I toss till dawn. My body is covered with maggots and scabs. My skin breaks open, oozing with pus. My days fly faster than a weaver's shuttle. They end without hope. O God, remember that my life is but a breath, and I will never again feel happiness. You see me now, but not for long. You will look for me, but I will be gone. Just as a cloud dissipates and vanishes, those who die will not come back. They are gone forever from their home, never to be seen again. I cannot keep from speaking. I must express my anguish. My bitter soul must complain. Am I a sea monster or a dragon that you must place me under guard? I think my bed will comfort me and sleep will ease my misery. But then you shatter me with dreams and terrify me with visions. I would rather be strangled, rather die than suffer like this. I hate my life and don't want to go on living. Oh, leave me alone for my few remaining days. What are people that you should make so much of us, that you should think of us so often? For you examine us every morning and test us every moment. Why won't you leave me alone, at least enough for me to swallow? If I have sinned, what have I done to you, O watcher of all humanity? Why make me your target? Am I a burden to you? Why not just forgive my sin and take away my guilt? For soon I will lie down in the dust and die. When you look for me, I will be gone. Then Bildad the Shuhite replied, how long will you go on like this? You sound like a blustering wind. Does God twist justice? Does the Almighty twist what is right? Your children must have sinned against him, so their punishment was well deserved. But if you pray to God and seek the favor of the Almighty, and if you are pure and live with integrity, he will surely rise up and restore your happy home. And though you started with little, you will end with much. Just ask the previous generation. Pay attention to the experience of our ancestors. For we were born but yesterday and know nothing. Our days on earth are as fleeting as a shadow, but those who came before us will teach you. They will teach you the wisdom of old. Can papyrus reeds grow tall with a marsh? Can marsh grass flourish without water? While they are still flowering, not ready to be cut, they begin to wither more quickly than grass. The same happens to all who forgets God. The hopes of the godless evaporate. Their confidence hangs by a thread. They are leaning on a spider's web. They cling to their homes for security, but it won't last. They try to hold it tight, but it won't endure. The godless seem like a lush plant growing in the sunshine, its branches spreading across the garden. Its roots grow down through a pile of stones. It takes hold on a bed of rocks, but when it is uprooted, it's as though it never existed. That's the end of its life, and the others spring up from the earth to replace it. But look, God will not reject a person of integrity, nor will he lend a hand to the wicked. He will once again fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the home of the wicked will be destroyed. So since my phone is about to die, I'm just going to read the revelations that I got while reading those two chapters. So for chapter 7, I put, there's nothing wrong with Job crying out to God for understanding and expressing his true emotions to him. But what I do find interesting is that Job and his friends automatically assumed that this was God's doing, but it wasn't. It was the devil's. Not every trial is from God, and assuming that it is can block our ability to see God's purpose through it. This is why when you're seeking God for understanding, don't confront him in an accusatory way. When you go in with an assumption of what you feel is happening, it'll be harder for God to get you to see what he's actually doing. Some of you, God has been trying to grow, but He can't grow you because you're sitting here complaining and accusing Him of doing something that is not His doing. There's this quote that says, "Not all things come from God, but everything God does turn around for your good." So even if this circumstance did not come from God, even if this circumstance came from the devil, even if this circumstance came from you, even if this circumstance came from a mistake, it may not have came from God, but God still has the power to turn it around for your good. But it's going to depend on your mindset, your perspective, and how you approach Him in this season. For chapter 8, I put, we always want to be able to explain why something happened. And when we can't, we assume and we take those assumptions as fact. That is what Job's friends did. They could not explain why the situation was happening to Job. If you go back to verse 4, he said, "Your children must have sinned against him, so their punishment was well deserved." You can't explain why this is happening, so you just assumed that his children did something and it was well deserved. But when we jump to conclusions based on our limited knowledge, it's harder for us to understand what God is doing and why this is happening. And so, no matter if you're in a situation like Job, and you have people in your ears, sometimes you have to go against what people are telling you and go straight to the source. Don't take what people are telling you as word. Don't take them saying you deserve this, you made this happen, you made a mistake, you caused this. Don't take that as word. Go to God for yourself and ask Him, why is this happening to you? And if you are on the opposite end of the spectrum, because when we talk about the story of Job, we only talk about it from Job's perspective, but sometimes we can be in the seat of his friends. We could be the person that is supposed to be comforting somebody in need. Don't base things off of your limited wisdom. You don't always have the answers. You don't always know everything. You can't always give them the answers that they're looking for and the clarity that they're looking for. So if you don't understand why something is happening, don't tell them that and make them take it as fact, because you're going to deter them off the road that God is taking them to teach them something in this difficult season. So that is all that we are going to be able to get through today. I did want to give you an action step based off of everything that we learned. Sometime this week, I want you to go to God for understanding over the storm that you're in. Don't accuse Him. Don't make assumptions. Just ask Him for clarity on what He's trying to get you to see in this season and to help you implement those things. You can even ask Him, God, expose the weak areas in my heart. Expose the impure areas in my heart. Let me see the errors of my ways and help me correct them. But that is all that I have for you today. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe so that you get a notification every time a new episode is released. Also, leave a review and let me and others know how you enjoyed the show. And if you want to stay connected, follow me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Prospering with Christ. But that's all I have for you today, and I will see you next week.